Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing, and That's Badass Wood Art. Remember to use promo code CTPocket at that'sbadasswoodart.com, and you can receive 20% off any one item on their store. We got a lot to talk about, Miles, before things really start to pick up. The Vikings have a list of a lot of impending free agents coming, and so I thought it'd be fun to get you on here and just chit-chat about who should we retain, who should we let walk. I feel like it's pretty simple as I go up and down the line of these people, especially when you think on the defensive side with Brian Flores coming in. But again, it wouldn't shock me to see a few of these guys come back on smaller deals for the Vikings. So I'm going to go down one by one, and you can kind of give me your thoughts, and we can kind of just riff back and forth. And for our viewers, feel free to comment and let us know. We'd love to see what your guys' thoughts are as well about some of these impending free agents before March kicks off. So
Let's
the
do it.
first one on my list, Patrick Peterson, obviously with Brian Flores being hired as the defensive coordinator, things are going to be a little bit different here schematically. So how do you think he fits in, and would you retain him or let him walk?
Yeah, I think if the Vikings had brought in Sean Desai or even Evero to be the DC, I think Patrick Peterson coming back would make a lot of sense because I think as he transitions in his age, he's going to be 33, 34 this year. I think as he, probably slows down a little bit. We know Patrick Peterson is an explosive defensive playmaker throughout his career, but he's getting older. He's starting to lose a little bit of that step, which is expected. That's not me being like knocking him. It's just the reality of life. And I think he would have been a good fit to come back as that veteran presence. But I think the way he played in 2022 to also go with the scheme, more cover zero, more man specific in his scheme, I think it'd be hard to justify bringing him back, especially at a number that I anticipated him looking to get. He kind of came back at a discount last year at $4 million. He was $8 or $9 million in 2021 when he first came to Minnesota, and he took about half of that in 2022. So I think to bring him back, it probably costs in that $6, $7, $8 million range. And I think if you're going to do that, why not go find a younger guy that fits the mold and that you could sign on a
100%.
multi-year deal? And so I kind of think you let you say thanks to Patrick Peterson, on a Hall of Fame career and coming to Minnesota and kind of coming back. But I think you let him go find another defense that he can play a lot more zone and try to win a championship somewhere else, because I just don't think it fits here anymore.
Yeah, I think one thing that it's important to note too, there's no guarantee that these players want to come back either. I know Patrick Peterson has said, yep, I would like to be, a part of the team next year. And yeah, there's no guarantee that he even wants to come back to play in this style of defense. And you also brought up the ring chasing. He probably wants to try and win a ring before he calls it a career, and he's getting up there. So let's move down the line here. Someone that I feel like is not getting a lot of conversation because I feel with the trade of TJ Hawkinson last year, it's everyone kind of knows the writing's on the wall, but tight end Irv Smith Jr. is a free agent. So what would you think here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I kind of think it's the writing's on the wall. You're not going to go pay Irv Smith to come back and be your second tight end in an offense that doesn't primarily use 2-3 tight ends the way the old scheme used to under Gary Kubiak and Kevin Stefanski. So I think it's nice to have multiple tight ends, and I think Irv Smith's a good playmaker, but he was the 50th overall pick. Injuries and then just like opportunity kind of limited the ceiling I think there's there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're kind of at a point with Irv where, because you brought in TJ Hawkinson and you expect to resign him to a long-term deal, you let, and if I was Irv, I kind of want to go explore an opportunity elsewhere, because the Vikings trading for TJ Hawkinson and spending what they did, it kind of told him everything he needed to know about where his future in Minnesota is. And he probably wants to go somewhere and go be that number one guy, maybe on a 1-year flyer, so he could prove himself, because he is still super young. And so I think, maybe he goes somewhere like a Cincinnati, or I don't know the team. It doesn't really matter where the team is right now, but I think you let him go explore that, and maybe the Vikings get lucky and get a comp pick back for it too, because
let's go.
Right. So like there's benefits to like letting him walk, but also I just don't think the fit's here anymore.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree with that. And maybe had they not gotten Hawkinson, there'd be that door would be open slightly, but I even still feel like he's been slightly disappointing in Minnesota. Not all his fault, of course, but
Right.
even in the moments this year where we saw him, there was a couple crucial drops, and I just don't think he quite got his
Yeah.
confidence and swagger. So,
And I think too, real quick before we move on, I think in Kevin O'Connell's offense, he likes that bigger tight end.
yep, for
I,
sure.
like even in I was going to say St. Louis, the Rams with Tyler Higbee, that's a big 6'6", 6'5" tight end. T.J. Hawkinson's in that 6'5" range, and Irv
Yeah,
Smith's on that 6'2" range. Not that he isn't a functional inline tight end, but I think he kind of likes having that guy that's big body, so there's a little bit more room there.
yeah. Let's go back to the defensive side of the ball. Another shining star on the defense, at least the second half of the season, Duke Shelley is a free agent. Where do you think he fits? Would you bring him back if you were running this team?
Yeah, I think Duke Shelley at like $2 to $3 million on another 1 year flyer, I'd have no problem bringing him back. I don't think he's a guy that has shown enough in a sample size to bring him back on like a multi-year deal unless it's super cheap and team friendly. Otherwise, giving him a 1 year flyer to kind of like prove himself again.
Mm-hmm.
In this scheme, I think he's probably more of a sticky man-to-man type player than he is a zone. But he played well in this scheme, in the old scheme under at Donatel. But I do wonder with that small sample size if it was like if it's sustainable, because we've heard a lot of people from like PFF, Eric Eager, our friend, not Sumer Sports, former of PFF. He's talked about how coverage grades are very inconsistent year to year, and so it's
Yep.
hard to bet on that. And so it'd be hard for me to bet on Duke Shelley long term and at a high number beyond beyond the small sample size that we got from him. So yes, he played really well, and I think he was a shining star, like a bright star in a bad defense last year. But I'd only bring him back on a short term and make him more like, you're not bringing him back to guarantee him anything. You're bringing him back to compete
Mm-hmm.
and as depth. And I think if he can win a job, cool. But if he expects to be a starter, I think that's a little bit of a different conversation.
Yeah, I think the one thing I think about Duke Shelley is I want him back at what your point, the right cost, because
Yeah,
there's two different things. The Vikings obviously want cornerback depth, and they know what Duke Shelley did last year. Duke Shelley knows what he did last year, and he's going to want to cash in. And so, can they even find that middle ground to say, "Yeah, I'm going to come back," or is Duke Shelley going to be like, "Thanks for the
yeah.
opportunity. I'm going to go get my bag, and hopefully I can replicate what I just put on film this year." So,
No, that's
I
exactly it. And I think if Duke Shelley hits free agency, if you don't get a chance to re-sign him before free agency hits, and he has someone saying, "Hey, here's $5-6 million," you kind of got to say thanks, thanks, but like, good luck.
I guess there's two more big names that we can talk about. Garrett Bradbury at center. Uh, it's tough. This one, I think, I don't know what his value is truly going to be. He
Yeah.
played well this year when he was healthy. You don't have a lot of draft assets to go and maybe find a center. So maybe you're looking at free agency and that class isn't very good. So I don't know. This one's a tough one for me.
Well, real quick, like talking about the free agent class, I don't think it's like awful. I think you could like if Garrett Bradbury doesn't come back and you don't get him back on a deal that feels comfortable for the team. um, I think I mentioned guys like Bradley Bozeman. His wife even liked a tweet of mine naming him out, which I thought was funny, which is cool. Ethan Posich, who was underwhelming in Seattle, but ended up playing really well in Cleveland last year. There's Sam Mustipher, who played for the Bears. He was very up and down, so he's not really like a guy that I'm like, oh yeah, go get him. But
Right.
he's a guy that like could be a starter for you on a 1 year deal. Jake Brendel from the 49ers is really good for them, and then Connor McGovern for the Jets was also really good. So there's a few guys out there that if you can't find that middle ground, kind of talk about like the other guys like Duke Shelley and mainly Duke Shelley, but like and probably a guy we'll talk about soon and Dalvin Tomlinson. But like if you could find that middle ground with Garrett Bradbury, bring him back. I think 6, 7, maybe top end $8 million a year. I wouldn't probably go much higher than that just because the first 3 years weren't very good.
Yeah.
He did look a lot better, but he had a back injury, and back injuries, especially in offensive lines, a tricky one. We don't know, but the Vikings medical staff should know if they anticipate that being a long-term issue or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you can get him at I think I've put out the numbers like 3 years, like 21, 24 million range, maybe even
Yeah.
less. I'd have no problem with like a $7 million per year number for for Garrett Bradbury on a very reasonable deal, especially with where the market is for centers.
Yeah, I think I saw, and it could have changed, but I think I saw it was like his estimated value was somewhere around 12 million a year. Um,
No
which
way.
I'd have to go back and check where that was. But at that price, absolutely no way. Have
No, you
fun.
can't.
It's been real. Um, good luck to wherever you go. But for your contract, I would be down for something like that, and I think the Vikings would too, to be honest, because their offensive line, when you look across the board, outside of the right guard position where Ed Ingram showed flashes last year, it's almost like solidified, and we know
Yeah.
how important it is to have a solidified unit, and if you could get all those guys back again next year, uh, the stability with that group it goes a long way. So
I know, and real quick, I know we talk about this as well, but like when you look 2 to 3 years out with the Vikings, the offensive line, Ezra Cleveland's heading into a contract year at
yep.
left guard. He might want to go explore and go become a tackle somewhere because that's where he's used to. He came in the league being a tackle, so we don't really know. Like, do the Vikings are they in a position where they have to choose between a Garrett Bradbury or an Ezra Cleveland long term?
Mhm.
Because we don't know the quarterback situation. Justin Jefferson's about likely going to get paid here soon. Christian Darrisaw right after that. Like, so we're kind of in a situation with the Vikings offense where they might need to choose between, a Cleveland and a Bradbury. And right now, if you can get Bradbury in a reasonable cost, he might be worth keeping over Cleveland long term. So it's kind
Yeah.
of an interesting one to think about.
I misspoke. There were 2 other big names. You mentioned one, so we'll start there.
Yeah.
Dalvin Tomlinson. Obviously, this one's a little bit interesting because he's got the void year, and
Yeah.
so bringing him back could actually save us some money, depending on what the structure is. But what are your thoughts on bringing back Dalvin Tomlinson?
Yeah, I mean, so they brought Tonga back, which I think was a good move for an exclusive rights free agent. He flashed and kind of was a good interior defensive lineman that you needed. Then you have Harrison Phillips. Otherwise, it's kind of a bare covered on that D
Mhm.
line. And so whether it is Dalvin Tomlinson or another free agent, they need to bring in a veteran to help kind of solidify that defensive line because right now it's very bare. And Otomo was a solid rookie last year. I think showed a
Yeah,
couple flashes. He's a guy that you develop, right? But he's not someone
exactly.
I'm going into 2023 relying on.
Mhm.
And so you really need to figure that out. And to your point with Dalvin Tomlinson, he showed, especially the first half before he got hurt, he looked really good in this defense and in the defense previously. And I think it's still a similar 3-4 style defense, maybe a little bit more aggressive. So maybe that fits his skill set. But he's a guy that if you can get him back he was making, it was like what, a 2-year, $22 million deal, I think in total.
Yep.
And with the first deal with the Vikings, he's probably going to want to raise from that, especially with where the cap's going. So you're looking at 13, 14, $15 million. That's a lot of money for a guy that doesn't, to me, get to the quarterback enough.
Yeah,
I liked that.
in
Yeah, go
Flores'
ahead.
defense, you want that. You want that interior defensive lineman to get that pressure on the
Yeah,
quarterback,
yeah,
and so I feel like I know where you were going here, but, when you throw in the
yeah.
price and then the new scheme with Brian Flores, I just don't quite see a match, as
I don't
great
see them
as
actually.
Tomlinson has
Yeah,
been.
like yes, if you can get him back at a similar number as what you got him the first time, 2 years, 20, 23, 24 million,
Mhm.
3 years, 30, 33, 34, like that type of range, I guarantee the Vikings would be all over it because they can kick that dead cap, that void year, and
Down
spread
the
that
road.
that number out over the
Mhm.
rest of the life of that new contract, which would help you in this year. But if he's looking for that 14, $15 million range, it's kind of like that Duke Shelley, kind of like Garrett Bradbury. If those guys are going to go break the bank, you kind of got to let them go break the bank somewhere else and go find a younger player
Yeah.
in free agency to. And there are a couple guys that I know we're not kind of going too deep into this, but there's a decent market for that defensive end,
Yeah.
defensive tackle market in free agency this year. So if Dalvin Tomlinson's going to price himself out, you might be able to go get a Zach Allen. I think Draymond Jones is going to be really expensive, but
I know
Draymond
that's a
Jones from
guy
the
you've mentioned a lot too.
yeah. I mean, he's really good. Javon Hargrave too is another guy that's played really well in Philly.
Yep.
John Kaminsky for the Detroit Lions was really solid. Greg Gaines for the Rams. There's familiarity there with the coaching staff, and then he's he's a restricted free agent, but I really like Tier Tart from the Tennessee
Okay.
Titans. He's more of a nose tackle, but you could also shift Harrison Phillips around too. And he was a disruptive player for the Titans last year. And Zach Allen, I think I said Zach Allen. And then last guy was Charles Omenihu for the 49ers, got traded from the Texans. He's another defensive end that's shown to flash some pressures. And so, like, there are guys out there that I think you could. Yes, I would like to bring Dalvin Tomlinson back, but if he prices himself out, I think there's enough available D linemen out there that you could replace him for a cheaper price.
Miles giving everybody the glimpse into the future of Vikings Happy Hour when we go over and free agent fits for the team.
I know. My bad.
That's
My
all
bad.
good. That's all good. One more name, and then let's go into rapid fire for the rest of them.
Yeah.
Alexander Mattison. This one seems pretty straightforward to me. But if the Vikings maybe move on from Cook, maybe there's an opportunity to bring Mattison back in some capacity. But I do feel like it's a let walk situation, but curious your thought.
Yeah, I mean, I do think unless Dalvin Cook comes back at a reduced cost, which it sounds like he's not willing to do, you're going to have to let Dalvin go as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're looking at Ty Chandler and Kenny Nwangwu. And I love Kenny Nwangwu, but he's a returner. He's not, I don't think he's really that 3-down back or even like a gadget type player. He's a guy that you can get the ball in his hands and he's got obvious speed, but he isn't like that. Give the ball to him and he gets 200, 300 touches on offense. He's not that guy.
Yeah.
Ty Chandler might be able to become that guy. There's a little bit more vision and I think inside ability there. But you need another complementary back to those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's free agency, whether that's the draft, Mattison would be like, I probably wouldn't have an issue with bringing Mattison back, but I think I'd rather bring a guy in that has a little bit more explosion.
Yeah.
A guy that can get to the second level a little bit more consistently than Mattison does. And I think he might be wanting to go explore options as well. And so I think we've kind of found a theme. If you can get Mattison back at $2 million, $3 million tops on a 1-year flyer, sure, I probably would be okay bringing him back. But I kind of think you let him go explore, and I think you bring in some new blood, whether it is again through the free agency or the draft. But it needs to be cheap. It needs to be someone that isn't highly expensive.
That's the thing with all of these guys, right? I'd love most of them back. It's all about if that money's going to match and if it makes sense for our team. And when you bring up people like Jefferson, Hawkinson, Cleveland, all these guys that are going to need extensions, got to make cuts somewhere. So,
and the running back position is a little bit easier to replicate, especially in an offense that
I know they said
they want to run the ball more, but the passing game is still going to be the priority for this offense. So I think you could find a replacement a little bit easier in this scheme.
All right, so rapid fire. I'm gonna name them. You say retain, let walk, and just give a quick sentence. Or you can just say, I mean, if it's obvious, you can just let me move on to the next. But let's start. Chris Boyd, retain or let walk.
I mean, he's a good special teams player. Minimum maybe. Otherwise, let him walk probably.
Okay, Jonathan Bullard.
Let walk, but I'm like. He's another one of those guys. Like he'll be dirt cheap more than likely.
Yeah.
So if you get him back at the veteran minimum, non-guarantee type deal, and let him come to camp and see how he does, I don't know a problem with
that. Andrew DePaula. I don't know if you really need to talk about this one. It's long snapping. I know it's kind of important at that one point in time in the game, but
it wouldn't surprise me if they brought him back.
Yeah. Here we'll go. We'll point back to our conversation with Ryan Longwell this season and how important that unit is to stay similar. But we also might not have the next guy I'm going to talk about, Greg Joseph. Would you retain or let walk?
So he's probably the hardest one for me because I don't know what the market looks like for kickers and like him specifically. If you brought he's at a point where you can't bring him back at a number that is is a guaranteed number. Like you probably need to bring him back at a number that's very low, and you bring in competition. If he's a vet min or just slightly above vet min, and you bring in competition, fine, because he does have a strong leg. He showed flashes last year of that strong leg.
Yeah,
but he's very inconsistent. So, but to your point, if they want to keep consistency,
I think it's going to be very similar to how they handled Ryan Wright last year. Bring somebody in, compete, see if they can take the job. Otherwise, let Joseph stick around. Next one, Nick Mullins.
Do they draft a quarterback or not? But otherwise, I'd bring Nick Mullins back as a non-guaranteed
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
whatever vet minimum.
Austin Schlottman,
I'd let him go, but I wouldn't be surprised if they brought him back.
Chandon Sullivan.
Got to let him walk. They need a, that's like the position on defense they need like a major upgrade at.
Yeah. Yep. And then the last guy here, Oli Udo.
They brought Brando back, so I'd let Udo walk.
All right. Well, there it is. We made our decision. Sounds like we're letting most of these guys hit free agency unless they want to take a pay cut.
They got
Or
to turn over the roster a little bit more as they
yeah,
like they won 13 games, but on the defensive side especially, they got to let some of those guys go and bring in some new blood.
absolutely. Want to thank everybody for watching. If you haven't yet, please go and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. A lot more content rolling out coming up, as Miles kind of already alluded to, some of the free agent fits as we get closer to free agent period, which is only just a few weeks away. So with that being said, Skol Vikes.